He simply walked a few steps ahead before halting and slowly turning around. His smile was cold, calculating, and more terrifying than Curran had ever seen. "You're too curious for your own good," he said, his voice almost mocking. "Raghav doesn't like people poking around in his business. But you've done more than that. You've made it personal." Curran's heart raced. Made it personal? What did he mean by that? Before he could say another word, the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. The black seal glinted ominously in the dim light of the bridge. He handed it to Curran, his eyes narrowing as if daring him to open it. Curran hesitated, feeling the weight of the envelope as though it contained his fate. But then, with a quick motion, he tore it open. Inside was a photograph, one that sent a shockwave of fear through him. It was a picture of Arav and Karan, taken at the cafe they had visited just days ago. But it wasn't the photo itself that made Karan's breath catch in his throat. It was the background. Faintly visible in the corner, in the shadow of the alleyway, was a familiar figure, Raghav. It was clear now. Raghav had been watching them long before they knew, and this picture wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. Karan's fingers clenched around the photograph, his thoughts racing. How long had Raghav been following them? How much did he know? Arav, still standing at a distance, seemed to sense Karan's turmoil. He stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just about us anymore, Karan. It's about survival. You've been dragged into this, and now there's no way out. We can't run anymore." Karan met his gaze, his mind spinning. "We need a plan. Running. Running will only make it worse. We need to strike first." Arav's eyes softened for a moment, the vulnerability in them stark. "I don't know if I can survive this, Karan. I don't know if we can." But Karan stepped forward, his resolve hardening. "We will. We fight. Together." The man in the suit watched the exchange, his smile growing wider. "You really think you can win this? Against Raghav?" His tone was almost amused, as though watching them was a game. "You're just pawns in a chess match, and you'll never be able to outsmart the king." Before Karan could respond, the man turned sharply, his coat billowing behind him as he walked away. But not before delivering one final blow. "Raghav already knows everything. You've already lost." Karan felt the weight of his words settle in. Knows everything. But what did that even mean? Was he talking about their growing feelings for each other? About the moments they'd shared in the darkness when everything else seemed insignificant? Or was it something worse? Something deeper? The silence between him and Arav was suffocating. But then Arav broke it. "You're right," Arav whispered, his voice breaking. "We need to fight. We need to outsmart him." Karan nodded, though doubts still clouded his mind. They didn't have the luxury of time anymore. Every second felt like an eternity. As Arav turned to leave, Karan caught his arm. "Wait." Arav stopped, his gaze piercing. "What?" Karan hesitated. There was something he needed to know, something that had been haunting him for days. "Why didn't you tell me about Raghav sooner?" Karan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you keep me in the dark?" Arav's face softened, the weight of guilt clouding his eyes. "Because I didn't want to pull you into this," he said. "I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong. And now it's too late." Karan clenched his fists, his chest tight. "I'm already in this, Arav, and I won't back down. You're not alone." Arav looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "I never wanted you to be part of this world, but now that you're here, we have no choice but to fight." Just as Karan was about to respond, the sound of an approaching car broke through the tense silence. A sleek black sports car slowed down beside them, and Karan's heart skipped a beat. Saw who was inside. Raghav. The mafia boss leaned against the door, his cold gaze scanning both of them with an unsettling intensity. "You think you can fight me?" His voice was laced with both mockery and danger. "I own everything, including you." Arav's body stiffened, but Karan could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to slice through. Raghav's eyes locked with Karan's. "This ends tonight. You have two choices. Stay out of my way or join me." Karan's blood ran cold. Stay out of his way or join him. It was clear that this was just the beginning, but Karan couldn't back down. Not now. Not when everything he cared about was on the line. The wind carried the faint scent of the ocean as it crashed against the cliffs. Karan stood there, staring at the black sports car with Raghav still leaning against it, his posture exuding confidence and danger. The very sight of him stirred something deep within Karan. He was no longer just a figure of fear or admiration. He was a force, a dark presence that Karan couldn't ignore. Arav stood next to Karan, his face pale but determined. Raghav, he muttered, his voice shaking ever so slightly. Raghav's lips curled into a smirk as he pushed himself off the car, slowly walking toward them. I didn't expect both of you to be so eager to play this game. His voice was cold, every word like a blade cutting through the tension. But I see I've underestimated you, Karen. I thought you'd break. You seem more resilient than I gave you credit for. Karen's heart was pounding in his chest. He could feel his pulse in his throat as he tried to stand his ground. He knew this was the moment. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about uncovering the truth. I'm not afraid of you, Karen said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Raghav's eyes narrowed. You should be. You have no idea what you're up against. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Karan's. But I'll give you a choice since you're so eager to play. You want to know what this is all about? Fine. I'll tell you everything. Karan's breath caught in his throat. Everything? Arav looked at Karan, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Are you sure about this, Karan? Karan nodded firmly, his eyes never leaving Raghav. We need to know, Arav. We need to know what we're really dealing with. Raghav let out a low laugh, his voice laced with both amusement and something darker, more dangerous. You're too eager for your own good. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But it's your choice. You really want the truth? Karan took a step forward. Tell me. Raghav stepped back, his smile widening. All right, you see, this isn't just about you or me, Karan. It's about family. He paused, watching the confusion flicker in Karan's eyes. Your family. Karan's mind raced. My family? He repeated, trying to make sense of the words. What are you talking about? Raghav's gaze flickered to Arav, his eyes almost mocking. It's simple, really. Arav has been keeping a secret from you. A secret about your family, about your father. Arav flinched as if he had been struck. His face turned pale, and he took a step back, his breath ragged. Raghav, stop, he pleaded, his voice desperate. But Raghav's smirk only deepened. Oh, the truth hurts, doesn't it? Karan's heart began to race, his hands clenched at his sides. What do you mean, Raghav? What about my father? Raghav straightened, his gaze piercing. Your father wasn't just some businessman, Karan. He was involved in things far darker. He was a part of a network, a group of influential men with ties to the underground world. And when your father crossed me, when he tried to betray me, he paid the price. Karan's world seemed to tilt, his breath faltering. No, that can't be true. Raghav stepped closer, his voice cold as ice. Oh, it's true. Your father had his secrets. He was a man who thought he could walk away from the game. But in our world, there is no walking away. Your father's betrayal cost him everything. And now, it's your turn. Arav stepped in front of Karan, his hands shaking as he tried to block Raghav's view. Karan, please listen to me, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't want you to find out like this. Karan's eyes darted between Arav and Raghav, his mind racing to process the words. Arav, is this true? Is this what you've been hiding from me? My father, he betrayed Raghav? Arav nodded, his eyes filled with regret. Yes, but Karan, it wasn't what you think. Your father was forced into it. He didn't want to get involved in this world. He was trying to protect you, trying to get out of the game, but he couldn't. And in the end, he made a deal with Raghav that went wrong. Karan felt as if the ground had been pulled out. His father, the man he had looked up to, had been tangled in this dark world, just like him, just like Arav. His father's betrayal was the reason why everything had spiraled out of control. It wasn't just Raghav's power that had crushed them. It was his father's choices. Why didn't you tell me? Karan whispered, his voice breaking. Arav's shoulders slumped, guilt evident in every line of his face. I wanted to protect you, Karan. I didn't want you to become part of this world. But now, it's too late. We're all in it, and Raghav won't stop until he gets what he wants. Raghav chuckled darkly, his eyes flicking from Karan to Arav. Oh, this is just getting interesting. You see, Karan, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Your father's mistakes are about to become yours, and I always get what I want. Karan's chest tightened as the weight of Raghav's words settled in. His father's past had come to haunt him, and there was no escape from the storm that was about to break. But one thing was clear, Karan wasn't going to back down. He wouldn't let Raghav's shadow dictate his future. He would fight no matter the cost. The sun had started to set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the ocean, but Karan couldn't bring himself to appreciate the beauty of it. The waves crashing against the cliffs, the faint scent of salt in the air, nothing could drown the chaos swirling in his mind. He stared at Raghav, his breath still heavy, his chest tight with the weight of the truth that had just been revealed. Raghav's words echoed in his mind. Your father betrayed me, and now it's your turn. He couldn't wrap his head around it. His father, a man who had always been the beacon of integrity in Karen's life, was now nothing more than a figure lost to the shadows of betrayal. And the worst part? Karen had unknowingly walked into the very trap his father had set. This wasn't just about a fight for power anymore. This was about survival. Arav's voice cut through the storm in Karen's mind. Karen, we need to talk. Let's get out of here, away from Raghav's reach. But Karen didn't move. He couldn't. Raghav had just stripped away the last bit of trust he had in his father. He had been living a lie, and now there was no turning back. Raghav watched them both, amusement flickering in his eyes. You can run all you want, Karan, but you can't escape this world. You're in it now. You always were. Karan turned to Arav, his face etched with determination. We can't keep running. We need to face this head on. Arav's face paled, fear flashing in his eyes. What do you mean, Karan? We can't confront him like this. He's too powerful. I don't care anymore, Karan said, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. I'm not running away from the truth. I want to know everything. I want to face it, whatever it takes. Arav took a deep breath, his face softening with a hint of sadness. Karan, the truth isn't something you're prepared for. Once it's out there, it can't be taken back. There's no undoing the damage. Raghav's cold laugh echoed in the silence between them. Arav's right, Karan. The truth is a dangerous thing, and it's already out of your control. Karan clenched his fists, his anger rising. You think you can break me with your games, Raghav? You think you have power over me because of my father's mistakes? You're wrong. Raghav stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. Don't fool yourself, Karan. I've always had power over you. This game isn't about winning or losing. It's about surviving, and I'll make sure you survive, on my terms. The intensity of the moment hung thick in the air, but Karan refused to let fear control him. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to be intimidated by Raghav, no matter how ruthless he was. Arav looked between Karan and Raghav, his face twisted with indecision. Raghav, you can't keep doing this. He's not the one who betrayed you. Enough, Raghav interrupted, his voice sharp. Don't try to defend him, Arav. You know better than anyone that Karan is another pawn in this game. He might think he has control, but in the end, it's me who pulls the strings. Karan took a step forward, standing tall. If you think you can control me with fear, you're wrong. I'll fight for my own future. I'll fight for my own choices. Raghav's smirk faded, and for the first time, Karan saw something deeper in his eyes. A flicker of respect, but also something more dangerous. You're brave, Karan, but don't mistake bravery for stupidity. You're standing on the edge, and one wrong move could be your last. Karan didn't back down. I'd rather die standing up for what's right than live a life controlled by fear. There was a long, tense silence. Raghav stared at him for a moment, his gaze unreadable, before he let out a sharp breath as if deciding something. We'll see how long your resolve lasts, he said, his voice cold once again. But I'll warn you, Karan, when the truth comes crashing down, it's not going to be pretty. He turned and walked away, his black sports car waiting for him, as if the confrontation had been nothing more than a casual exchange. The sound of the engine roaring to life was like a final warning, echoing in the distance. Arav stood next to Karan, his face filled with concern. You don't understand, Karan. You're not ready for what's coming. But Karan was done listening to fear. He was done letting others dictate his fate. I don't care what's coming, Arav. I won't let Raghav control me any longer. I'm going to fight for the truth, for my own freedom. Arav hesitated, then finally nodded. I don't want to lose you, Karan. You're my best friend. But I can't stop you from making your own choices. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, but Karan knew there was no going back now. He had made his decision. He was going to face whatever Raghav had planned for him, head on. Karan spent the next few days in a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to make sense of everything that had been revealed. Every conversation, every confrontation seemed to lead him deeper into a maze of lies and deceit. He couldn't shake the image of his father, his face now clouded by betrayal and secrets. How had he not seen the signs? How had he been so blind to the world his father had been a part of? But Karan knew one thing for sure. The past wasn't going to dictate his future. He was going to uncover every truth, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of the underworld. And as the days passed, he realized something else. He wasn't alone in this fist fight. Arav, despite the weight of the secret he had kept, was still by his side. They had been through so much together, and Karen knew that their bond would be the one thing that could withstand the storm that was about to break. But with every passing moment, Karen could feel Raghav's shadow looming closer. His warning echoed in Karen's mind. When the truth comes crashing down, it's not going to be pretty. Karen wasn't prepared for what Raghav had planned, but he was ready for whatever came next. He had no other choice. The silent war had begun. The tension between Karan and Raghav had reached its breaking point. The constant pull and push between them, the never-ending games of power and control, were finally converging into one unavoidable moment of truth. Karan's heart was heavy, filled with a mix of confusion, betrayal, and something he hadn't been willing to admit for so long. He was in love with Arav. But despite the intimacy between him and Arav, the looming presence of Raghav hovered over them like a storm waiting to break. One cold, silent night, Karan found himself once again at the edge of the cliff overlooking the vast ocean, the place where he and Arav often found solace from the world. But tonight, it was different. There was no comfort in the familiar view, only the sharp sting of unresolved questions. Arav approached, his footsteps slow but sure. He knew that something was gnawing at Karan, a burden that Karan wasn't willing to share. Karan, Arav spoke softly, his voice laced with concern. You've been distant again. What's going on? Is it Raghav? Karan closed his eyes, the weight of everything threatening to consume him. It's all connected, Arav, he admitted, his voice shaky. Raghav has been playing us both, and I think I'm starting to understand why. Arav moved closer, standing beside him. What do you mean? What's his purpose? Karen's eyes darkened with realization. I think Raghav has been using me. He's not just after revenge. There's something else, something bigger that involves both of us, but I don't know what yet. Before Arav could respond, a familiar voice echoed from behind them, cold and calculating. You're not wrong. Karan turned swiftly, his heart pounding as Raghav stepped out of the shadows, his presence as commanding as ever. Raghav, Karan said, his tone sharp. What are you playing at? All this time, all these games. Why? Why us? Raghav's lips twisted into a smirk, but there was something darker in his eyes, a flicker of something that Karan hadn't seen before. You want the truth, Karan? The truth is, I've never been after you or Arav for the reasons you think. He paused, letting the tension build. I didn't come to destroy you. I came to save you. Arav's brows furrowed in confusion. Save us? From what? From you? Raghav nodded slowly, his eyes glinting with a mixture of frustration and resolve. Yes, you see, Karan, the man you think is your father, he wasn't your real father. Your real father is a powerful figure, someone you've been kept in the dark about. I'm not just here to settle scores. I'm here to protect you, and this whole mess has been my way of making sure you're prepared. Karan's heart skipped a beat, the shock of Raghav's words taking hold. What are you talking about? My real father? Who is he? Raghav's face remained cold, his voice steady. Your real father was involved in a dangerous web of criminal activities, and the enemies he made are still out there. The reason I've been keeping you close is to ensure you don't fall into their hands. You, Karan, are the heir to a legacy that you don't even know about. You are part of something far bigger than you ever imagined. Arav stepped forward, his anger rising. You're telling me you've been playing with Karan's life all this time just to protect him? How does that make any sense? Raghav's gaze hardened. You think I've enjoyed this? You think I've enjoyed seeing him struggle, seeing you two tangled up in this mess? No, but I had no choice. If you knew the truth too soon, you would have been unprepared. The enemies who want Karan dead are watching from the shadows. I had to keep you both alive long enough to understand the bigger picture. Karan's mind raced. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the pain of betrayal still lingered. He'd been used, manipulated. His whole life had been a lie. So, You wanted me to trust you, to let you control my life because of some hidden legacy? Raghav's eyes softened, almost regretful. Yes, but not because I wanted control, because I knew you couldn't fight this battle alone. I knew the truth would destroy you, Karan, and I couldn't let that happen. There was silence between them, the weight of Raghav's words hanging in the air. Karan felt the shock begin to settle into his bones. Everything he had known about his past was a lie. Everything had been orchestrated, controlled. His heart twisted in betrayal. Arav's hand found Karan's, squeezing it tightly. No matter what the truth is, Karan, we face it together. We'll fight this, whatever it takes. You're not alone. Karan looked into Arav's eyes, seeing the sincerity in them, the love that had always been there, waiting for him to accept it. And for the first time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. Raghav looked at the two of them, a deep sigh escaping his lips. You may not understand it now, but in time you will. Just know that everything I've done for your own protection. With Raghav's revelation hanging in the air, Karan knew that there was no more running from the truth. The legacy of his real father, the enemies lurking in the shadows, and Raghav's role in it all, the entire weight of it bore down on him. But he wasn't going to let Raghav dictate his life anymore. He wasn't going to be a pawn in someone else's game. If his father's enemies were coming for him, he would fight back. And this time, he would do it with Arav by his side. They gathered together in the heart of the city, ready to face Raghav and the darkness that surrounded them. Raghav stood before them, his expression unreadable as he prepared to make his final move. Karan took a deep breath, his heart steadying in the presence of Arav. We're ready, Raghav, Karan said, his voice full of determination. Whatever comes next, we'll face it, but I won't be your pawn any longer. Raghav's gaze softened for a moment before he spoke in a low tone. I never wanted to be your enemy, Karan, but this fight, it's not just for you. It's for the legacy you don't even know about yet. Karan looked at Arav, his hand clasped tightly in his. Together, they walked toward their future, ready to face the battles that awaited them. With Raghav's truth now out in the open, they would no longer be manipulated by the shadows of the past. They would fight for their love, for their freedom, and for the truth. The battle with Raghav's enemies was intense, but with Raghav's unexpected assistance, they managed to outsmart them. The final showdown left Karan and Arav exhausted, but victorious. The danger that had once overshadowed their love had finally been vanquished. In the aftermath, as they stood together, bloodied but unbroken, Karan turned to Raghav. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere, for everything. Raghav nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and understanding. I've done what I could. Now it's time for you to live your life, Karan. With the past behind them and the future ahead, Karan and Arav shared one final moment of peace. The love that had once seemed impossible, the bond that had been tested by lies and betrayal, had survived. It was real. It was theirs. As they walked away from the ruins of the past, hand in hand, Karan finally understood the meaning of freedom, not just from the chains of his legacy, but from the fear of loving. Together they would build a new life, no longer burdened by the darkness of their past, but instead filled with hope for the future. How did you like this part of the story? Do let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and support so that you can enjoy more interesting stories like this. Until then, take care.